Welcome to the Sedona Soul Sisters show, down-to-earth discussions on metaphysics, spirituality, paranormal, and healing topics. The Sedona Soul Sisters are the most trusted psychic mediums in Sedona, Arizona. We are Rosalind Reynolds, myself, Ivory Lanou, Terri-ann Russell, and Melissa Brace. We have offices in Sedona where we see clients from all over the world. Today's topic is time travel. If you're watching or listening to the show later and you have questions, you can email them to us. That email is in the show discussion, and we'd be happy to respond. Oh, this is a fun topic when we're all mystics, and we'll get into that. But I thought we might start with the sci-fi version of time travel, the scientific expectations of it, where you get in some device and transported forward or backward in time. When I was looking up information about this just to add to the show today, and everything mentioned Back to the Future movies. Do you remember those?
Mm-hmm.
Where he'd get in that car and go back and he would be able to change the future, but every time he did, he messed it up further and further till I think he killed off his own grandfather and was never born, something to that effect. So there's all these preconceived notions about that. I know just kind of one interesting thing, like, is time travel possible? I had heard about this before, and I heard about it again recently. It came up, and I just wanted to kind of share with you. One of the most famous time travelers in real life happened back in November of 2000. And a guy who called himself John Titor posted a message on this little known internet discussion board called the Time Travel Institute Forum. He said he'd come from the year 2036 to help save the world, and he was heading to Rochester, New York for the IBM 5100 portable computer. The first message he wrote was, "Greetings, I am a time traveler from the year 2036. I'm on my way home after getting that computer I mentioned from the year 1975. He said he'd made a side trip to 2000 to pick up some family photos and check in on family in Tampa and Rochester. That introduction that he put just set off this flurry of, oh my gosh, is this real? What if, who is this person? That people just there were so many messages that shut down the board for that website, just shut their website right down. And over the next 4 months, he posted 570 messages about things like a civil conflict over a US presidential election. He warned about a mad cow disease outbreak, and he told about an impending minor nuclear war with Russia. Most of his predictions did not come true, I'm happy to say. So take a sigh of relief about the nuclear war. But some of them did. And he explained this by saying that by traveling back in time, he'd changed the continuum. That's always the kind of like when people predict doomsday and then they say, well, now it's been moved. So he did talk about what his life was in 2036. And he said, it's like an average day on a farm. He lived in a community made up of tree houses on a large river in Florida. The river floods and they have access to the Gulf, and most of the neighbors make a living off the sea or in moving cargo by boat. And then he said, perhaps I should let you in on a little secret. No one likes you in the future. This time period is looked at as being full of lazy, self-centered, civically ignorant sheep. Perhaps you should be less concerned about me and more concerned about that. He posted his last message in March of 2001 and said he was headed back to 2036. So, people are hungry. They want to believe that it's true. There's certainly been other instances. Have you ladies heard about other things related to this? What, Melissa?
Well, there are pictures of people in different time periods. I don't know if they've been doctored. I don't know. Like, I wasn't there, but like photographs from 1930.
Yes.
And someone seems to have like a cell phone, like a literal little box up to their face. When we We didn't even know what that meant in 1975 or 1985. We didn't know. So in 1930, you know, and there are different photographs of different people wearing different things that we were like, that did not exist then. And so that's a little bit curious. And I think there are a couple of other stories, but it's almost like they were so people were treated so badly, like, oh, great, another crazy person, that were not, you know, they weren't well-known stories. But I've read about the John Titor one as well.
I always thought, like, what would I do? What would my reaction be if a person who seemed sane, or maybe even somebody I knew, revealed to me that they were from the future? You know, what would I do? I would hope that I would listen to them and have an open mind, but it would be really hard, wouldn't it?
What if it was you that came from the future to tell yourself something?
Probably have an easier time believing that because I know I'm sane and that I'm really seeing that. It would freak me out a little bit, be wig out, but I think that'd be easier to take. And
Yeah.
what kind of proof could they give you that they come from the future that would make you believe it? I don't know. Like, could they bring an object? You know, could they bring something that doesn't exist yet? I don't know. I think it's really difficult. And you're right, Melissa. Anybody who comes forward and says that, of course, they're going to open themselves up to a lot of major skeptics and outright trolls and people who are just so close-minded. But so why, why hasn't humanity succeeded in making such drastic leaps forward in time travel? And it's because of velocity. Did you know that? They cannot get enough velocity yet to launch somebody into the future. They would have to be a black hole, or they'd have to send the traveler forward into space at close to the speed of light. And with their current technology, they could only jump a few milliseconds into the future. Not too exciting. Like, blink your eyes and whoo, you're there. Quick, look at the news. I was looking. Go ahead.
It's sort of like part of what's it called, it's the experiment where they were on the ship and then you know, like they were missing for a moment, everybody was missing, and then all of the people returned, but they were stuck in walls and they were half, like it was, they half, you know, came back in half forms. And so it's like whatever time travel that they did the experiment, I forgot what it's called. I should look it up on the phone real quick. But it's really similar to Star Trek, like when they say, beam me up, Scotty. And the molecular structure, you can just see it, them, you know, like unforming and then reforming wherever they're going. It's a similar or same concept of, and I think humanity has been kind of working on it for a while. Like I think they have been experimenting and trying to figure out just the right formula so that we can move through, you know, get the correct velocity and move through time. I think we make it harder than it will be or really will be.
That's interesting. You bring that up about the, you know, breaking apart at a cell, like a molecular level, and then being put back together. It reminds me of something, and we've talked about this amongst ourselves, but first, you know, the first time that I felt my whole body vibrating, and when I lifted my hand up, my hand was vibrating energy. Everything in the room was vibrating energy. And I think that is what you're talking about, Melissa. Like, we are developing the ability to kind of come apart at this very basic level and reform someplace else. And for all we know, that's what mystics do. You know, that's how, because mystics, we all four mystics time travel. We absolutely do. I do on a regular basis. You know, I'm not, you can say whatever you want,
Yeah.
but it's a reality, right?
Yep.
Absolutely.
So why do you think mystics can do that?
I think it's
well, I mean, I think it's an approach to, you know, not having your mind, body, spirit be stuck. I always used to tell people, I'm not stuck here. I leave. And it's about the frequencies of these other locations and sort of allowing yourself to, yeah, travel through a time tunnel that is a very neutral frequency, and then you come out in a different frequency and therefore a different time. So I don't particularly recall ever going to the future in my, you know, in my travels. But especially in my 20s, I remember doing I wasn't even intentionally doing it. I mean, just doing a lot of astral travel. And I would come into a place and I could feel myself come into it, and it was completely different than anything here or anything in this time. And I was a different person, and it was quite trippy, you know. I remember, I think I was about 19 or 20 the first time I ever really remember doing that on what I considered to be a very large switch of energy. And I remember sort of coming back and like going thud. Just, and it was such a shock to come back. And I really felt very disoriented for a few minutes. So I think, you know, we all have that capability, especially if we're able to let go of needing to be in the current moment and in the here and now. You know, it's kind of funny because I think about how Eckhart Tolle is always talking about, you know, be in the now. I'm like going, why? Let's go over here.
That's like stay in your hometown for the rest of your life.
Oh,
I know
and
what he's saying though. A lot of people do need that, but for me, like, yeah, as a child, I did a lot of astral travel in my youth, but for maybe 20 years, it's all been in a full waking state. And you're right. It is primarily traveling to the past for me. There's a couple of, like, one time I traveled into space, which was really weird. Like, that picture reminds me of it. Like, I was just realized I'm not in my bedroom anymore, and all around me was deep dark space like that, and stars. It was just black, except there was a really old, intricately like not carved but symbols in it, UFO hovering right above me, where I felt like I could reach up and touch it if I tried. And it stayed there for, I don't know, at least an hour, probably more, because I could really study it. And it was really rusty. It looked like it'd really been through a lot, and it was huge. But from my perspective, I was just out in space, but I could breathe. You know, it was so weird. That was the only time that's happened. So it
I
could
think
be in
it
the
is
future.
really weird.
I wouldn't know.
Sometimes our mind can't like comprehend what's going on, like our logistical mind. We're like, how can I breathe? I'm in space, you know, and you're thinking about it too much. But being that we have this, you know, etheric body, this physical body, and the mental, emotional body, I think for a lot of people, it's very easy. A lot of people I've talked to, it's very easy for them to sort of separate out of that. And I think when you're a mystic, I know for me, being that multidimensional, it's very easy for me to leave my body very naturally all the time. And like Roz was explaining, one time I did come back with that thump and I was crying and shaking, and I really didn't understand where I was or how that occurred. It was really, that was like the only time I think it's happened that it really freaked me out.
well, you kind of think you're going crazy, you know. And I've had a lot of people tell me that, you know, where they realized that they had left their body, quote unquote, and they were in a different place and doing something completely different. And then, you know, they're all of a sudden they're back, and then they're like, okay, I'm going nuts. something's wrong.
Well, when
Right. And you can't
anytime
remember.
anytime things are happening that aren't happening to most people, or especially people in your life, it does make you question, is something wrong with me? Am I having a mental breakdown here? We've talked about this, and especially like when you have a powerful spiritual awakening, it's the same sort of experience when you start experiencing things, seeing things that most people don't, then you question. But I know for me, like the only scary thing I can remember, and the reason it was scary is I was traveling so fast, was I was in my bedroom. Lots happens while I'm just laying in bed. It was in the afternoon. I wasn't feeling really good, but I didn't have a fever or anything. Can't explain it away with that. But all of a sudden, I was standing at the far end of this long, narrow waterway leading up to an East Indian looking palace. It's really beautiful. And that was fine. And I was fine with being there, and I was looking around. And then all of a sudden I was transported at high speed over that water. And it really scared me. Like I was screaming a little bit, like, ah, and then I just stopped right in front of the door, and then it all went away. So that, because I was moving so quickly and I didn't expect that, and I was off the ground, that scared me. Being in that place did not. I was curious as to what was going on. Has anybody ever felt that, like moving forward at that high speed like that when you're transported to another place?
Oh yeah.
I love that feeling. That's one of my
Oh,
favorite things. And that's part of my spiritual practice sometimes that I work on in my meditation. And I go into the out into the universe and ask to go different places. And I just maybe 15 years ago, I used to go in my head, I would go, oh yeah, I'm just going to travel today, or travel tonight, and fly. And there are sometimes like tubes, like they're portals, or
Wow.
ways to get to different dimensional spaces and directions. And so yeah, that's one of my favorite things, and to travel that way. And we do that sometimes, and Terri-ann can tell about this too, but we do, um in my practice, on occasion we do future life like progressions instead of past life. And so I have tried to access, time travel that way. And I always think it's funny. And I have a friend that goes, God, I've known her for years. And she goes, you're just kind of a short blonde lady, but I always see you as a really tall, dark-haired woman, like really like giant person. And in the future, I always look like that in my hypnosis, like future life. So I kind of like to have like dark hair, and I always like to wear jeans. Funny, if jeans are attire that we wear in, the year 3030, I'm in.
that doesn't scare me. Like going through those tubes in space, that doesn't scare me. That's a different story. It's a different sensation for me. But standing and being lifted off your feet and in a standing position, launched at rocket speed towards a building, no. I'm not up for that.
So you don't do roller coasters either.
No, I don't. I do not. You're right. You're right.
I think sometimes, I have very distinctive memories of moving forward at an extremely high speed. And it's like the videos that you see of being out in the universe, like there's these, streaking lights going by, all kinds of different colors, all kinds of different things happening. And I've always thought I must be like in a wormhole thing or something like that, but I never feel confined. I just feel like I'm out flying around.
When I go in those, I feel like my body is much more flexible. Like I bend and go and it's very easy and no stress on my body. Very effortless.
Yeah, it reminds me of that Space Mountain, like Raj, you're talking about, the Space Mountain ride where it's all dark and all you see is those lights going by.
Yeah,
That
the first time I went on that thing actually was fairly recently, probably like maybe 6 years ago, somewhere in that range. And I'd never been on it before. And it was funny because I was like, oh, okay, I know this.
And interestingly, that's the one roller coaster I really like. Maybe that's why I'm like, I've been on this before. I like this.
But you're right. It doesn't feel like you're confined or claustrophobic or anything. You're very free in that space, very fluid.
Mm-hmm. Like a Gumby.
I can't think of the name of the movie, but there was that movie with Jodie Foster.
Contact?
Yeah, I think where she actually does exactly what we're talking about. She's sitting in some type of a little time travel capsule or something like that. And I remember they had 18 minutes of blank tape or something, and she's gone into this other dimensional frequency. And it's just hanging out there, I think, with her father and just, you know, in this beautiful place. And then she comes back and they're going, oh no, we just had the blank tape. She said, oh no, I left. Pretty interesting, but pretty good description.
When I was in junior high, I had times of pretty extreme missing time, like missing 5 or 6 hours. And I was just sort of wiped out of my memory. And I've often thought that maybe at that point I did travel somewhere and just don't even, I wasn't given the memory. I couldn't retain the memory. But, there's a lot of things that kind of fit in with the way that we do time travel, which is very much a reality, metaphysical time travel. And maybe if, it's kind of like that thing where if they don't think you can handle it or you're not meant to retain the memory, you're not going to retain it.
True.
Or maybe they're doing something like an upgrade or tweaking something that you need, and maybe you don't need to remember it.
I don't know. I came both times that happened. I was living in the Appalachians on top of a ridge, and I had gone down to this Lake Linganore that was not even filled with water yet. They were still building it and they hadn't got the water in it. And I would suddenly be halfway between, I'd made it to there, and then I'd be halfway between there and home, which was quite a walk, by myself in the woods, and it was almost dark. And I left late morning. So that's just not something I would do. I'd be in a great deal of trouble for that. So I would not lose track of time in that way. And nothing was wrong with me, but I just didn't remember leaving the lake, the dam area, and coming back into that point in the woods. But I don't know, it could be so many different things. And I wonder if a lot of people are actually having these mystic experiences, but not yet remembering them.
Or sometimes I think they're having them and maybe they think they're hallucinating, like it didn't really happen, or they were daydreaming, or I was always told I had a very active imagination.
Oh, yes, me too. I was thinking about that yesterday. Why I didn't tell more people. Some of my family have said, why didn't you tell us more about, what you were experiencing? Because of your reaction when I did. Oh, you have such an imagination. That's what I heard over and over. And I do have a really good creative imagination, but that was different. This was something different. I'll be very interested to see at what kind of response we get to this show. I'm hoping people reach out to us who've had these experiences and thought they were going crazy, and getting some insight into what's going on.
I know sometimes losing that track of time, that's a big one. It's weird. It just happened a few weeks ago to Tim and I both at the same time, and we were driving in separate cars. And we both lost track of this chunk of time. It was like a half an hour. By the time I had looked at the clock last, it was 1:11. And by the time we came back and I looked at the clock again, it was 1:45. But this experience was really weird because we had the air on in the car and the car started heating up and all the windows fogged up. And I opened the windows, but the front window was still really foggy. And he said to me when we got to where we were going, this weird thing happened to me. I lost this chunk of time and all the windows in the car fogged up. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. And how were you seen to drive with the windshields like that?
I know. I was like, holy shit, like what's going on? But you know, I was really weird how I lost that chunk of time and how I was aware that I lost that chunk of time, because that was the last time I remember looking at the clock. And then I remember looking at the clock again.
That happened to me last Saturday. It happens to me frequently, as Roz knows. I've told her, but last Saturday, it took me 20 extra minutes to get to work with no explanation. I mean, even taking into account heavy traffic in Sedona, 20 minutes were just poof, gone.
Wow.
So it can happen at any time. I think we should share more of our experiences. Like, what is it like as a mystic? Give some examples of your time travel.
Well, sometimes when I'm driving, this has happened to me numerous times, and it used to happen to me with a particular boyfriend when we were together. Like we would have 2 hours missing, and as a person who is very cosmic and starseed-ish, where does this come into? Have you been abducted, or or
Yes.
are you time travel? Like, how does this all come into your own mind? Like, it's so overwhelming that you're like, so what if all of humanity and on our timelines are shifting and shifting and shifting in different ways, and our timelines are shifting, but none of us can really quite comprehend the full scale of it. And I've driven across the country. I like to travel and go work in different places and states and cities, and I like to drive usually. And the thing that's happened to me the most, that sometimes I get a little bit grumpy about, is I'll see a flash, like a flash behind me, and it's so big it lights up the sky. It's like all of a sudden, like a flash that's like nuclear or something, so bright white light that I go, they just changed me, meaning the light of God shifted something, and I am in a different time continuum space. So that's a sign for me. Sometimes that something large has shifted. It's just, there's nothing like it. And I don't know if I've actually told anyone that one, but numerous times, many times, especially driving at night. You can see it at the daytime, but especially driving at night, and it's very dark, and you can see your dash lights and you're driving. But if there's like an enormous flash that looks like, the sun just caught up with you and flashed you, took a picture of you, and you're different, you feel different. And sometimes that is when, like Terri-ann mentioned, like when the downloads will come in, or the codes, or the understanding in the next hours or days. That's when I start understanding things. So that's when I have been time traveling in that particular way.
And maybe that happens to you because, for those of you who don't know, Melissa drives a lot of long distance drives. And a lot of times you're out in the middle of nowhere at night. So it's a perfect time for something like this to happen. That's when I know that we're not talking about UFOs, but that's when I've had a lot of UFO experiences in Arizona, is driving around late at night on empty roads, so yeah, it's a good time for things to happen of that sort. What about for you, Terri-ann? What are your travels like?
They vary so vastly over the years, but one recent one, it was before we went on the road, but for me, and I astral travel a lot, like you said, in the afternoon. Like for me, that's like my open time to do a lot of that, or when I'm driving also. I remember being like in a ship, and I could see lights, like I was coming in and out of it. I wasn't really sure what was happening, but somebody swabbed my mouth, and I really felt like I would be okay. Like they weren't doing anything to hurt me. And I remember reaching out to Roz, and I was like, oh my God, Roz, this what just happened to me. It's going to blow your mind. It's crazy, isn't it? And she was like, yeah, oh my gosh. But things like that. So for me, I know, because in the afternoon, I like to just like rest and lay down and replenish. That'll be a time really that I'm very open. So I think if you can be really open to, whether you're going to sleep too, a lot of times, I know some of my clients will astral travel. That's the easiest time, because they're in between that wake and that rest period where they're going to go off and astral travel. But that was one of my most mind-blowing experiences that happened to me. There was a couple.
Do you think time travel is a prelude to, astral travel is a prelude to time travel?
Yes.
I
It
think,
was
like
for
Melissa
me.
was saying, we can really, those timelines can be shifted. I don't think it's linear and it's like, all right, well, Terri-ann's going to live till this age and this is what she's going to do. I think those timelines can be shifted and changed. And when we do something, or we're working in our purpose, or we're serving the light, and we're working together as a collective, and we're bringing up the frequency, I think those timelines have really a lot of variable where they can change.
Absolutely. What are yours like, Roz?
You know, I've thought about this off and on, not a lot really recently, because I do so much just like visioning when I'm awake in the last few years, all kinds of things going on. But I think for me, it really comes down to, I know I'm still connected, but I'm disconnected. And it's, I can't even really explain that experience. I mean, I know I'm moving. I know I'm in a different dimensional field. I I never feel any fear during this or any hesitation. It is like being on a roller coaster kind of. It's like I'm on the ride. Okay, let's go. I've watched a lot of video lately, actually on YouTube, of information about time traveling and about shadow people and how they come in and out of our dimensional field. And there's some fascinating video, really, by these closed circuit televisions that are all over the world, where suddenly it's a blank, it's just a blank picture of a normal corner with traffic moving, and suddenly, boom, there's a person coming in, or there's suddenly you see a shadow person. Or, I mean, a lot of times I'm thinking, when I'm watching these videos, well, that could really be any of us. I mean, we're not necessarily, there are people who specifically have behaviors that create time travel, apparently, but that could be any of us, just all of a sudden morphing from one place to another. So
That's a good point.
I try to kind of look at it from the perspective that for some reason, whatever's going on with moving from one dimensional field to another needs to be happening. There's something I'm being shown. There's something I need to know.
For
So,
me, it almost always happens lying in bed before I go to sleep. I'm wide awake. And the first thing that happens is I realize that there's enough light coming in through the window that I can see vague outlines of things in the room, but I'll realize things are getting foggy, and it gets more and more foggy. And I'm like, okay, here I go. Wonder where I'm going to go this time. The place that I'm transported to most often looks like a very large, ornate palace in France with a ton of Rococo on the ceiling. Really, and recently I got a different view of that same place. I saw the Rococo, and then on my ceiling, which turned into something else, was like this painting of stags on dark green with burgundy stags and 14 karat gold gilt on part of the design. And I saw that for quite a long time. It was quite beautiful. It looks like something medieval. And I could see wood on the wall where my windows should be, and the Rococo around that. And it was this like totally not my house, or any place I've seen in the United States. But I've been in that Rococo palace so many times. And I know it's connected to a past life, that I did a regression with Terri-ann, that I always knew there was something there. And interestingly, I know we're not talking about past lives, but I meant to tell you that Like I did have a connection to Palace of Versailles. And I found out recently, two of my very good friends, we never knew this about each other. They were in the Palace of Versailles at the same time I was. So isn't that interesting?
Your soul
It's very
journey.
interesting.
So I think
Mhm.
I just am really tied. I mean, it could even be the Palace of Versailles. I don't remember every detail about that place now, but I see that place. And so one thing I always wondered was, could I touch something and feel what I'm seeing? And I accidentally found out. I was very scared to do that because I thought if I got out of bed and walked away from my bed, I might not be able to go back to my own dimension, to my own time. And I didn't know, and I didn't want to take that chance. I had stuck my arm into it, and I can feel it. Like it's kind of like sticking my arm through something that's a little bit snug against my arm. And then once I get through it, it just feels normal. But I was at my sister's house on Christmas Eve 2 years ago. And I was in the guest room, which I've stayed in many times before. And I needed to go to the restroom in the middle of the night. It was very dark. And I was trying to feel my way to the door. And instead, I realized I was feeling something very different than her flat walls. And it was kind of rough, and it felt like a carving. And I really looked around, and I realized I'm in that Rococo place again, that fancy palace. And so I ran my hand down, and I could feel all of the carving. I could feel the designs, and it was absolutely just like you're in your room and you go over and feel your sofa. I could feel it. And luckily, I was getting a little panicky because I thought, now I'm in it. What if I can't find my way to the hallway or back to bed? But luckily, then in the dark, I found the doorknob. And when I opened the door, all of that palace went away. But I was kind of glad because it answered a question. I can get up and walk around in it. I can touch things and feel them. And I'll be absolutely able to go back to my current life. So I feel, like more like I can dive into that exploration now, which I've been doing.
And it's funny that you have that background too, because when you move, that's sort of how you're describing it. Like if you move your hand now, see how your hand is like sort of
Like with the
yeah.
background. Yeah.
Yes. And so
Yep.
it sort of has that texture to it when you're able to move around in that different dimension.
Yeah, it was so wild. Any other stories you have of your travels that stand out?
One of my favorite places to go in that way is I end up in Egypt and Greece. So there's two different places, and there's a house that I go to, and I don't know why, still off and on for 20 years, like when I'm doing that astral travel, and I'm not even doing it on purpose. And I go and I go visit different people. Like I go, not like stare at them or be creepy or anything, but like I know them and I don't know where they're at. And there was an old lady that I used to go see, not stare at her and, watch her pick her nose or anything, but our souls connected. And I don't know where it's at, but they're the two that I recognize would be Greece and those pyramid places in the Egypt. And that travel I've really seen throughout, different types of beings and things throughout time. And I might have said this, but when this is happening to make me aware, when I'm not all that conscious of what's going on, in the background, there will inevitably be some Ozzy Osbourne music. And then I'm like, look, it's so irrational. And it's funny because that is one of my favorite musicians. Don't tell anyone, okay?
He's listening right now. You know that.
But it's so irrational. It's so great. It's so crazy, Terri, which is Ozzy Osbourne's song. It's so crazy that I go, whoa, I'm supposed to be paying attention here. And I can just hear it in the background. Like it's almost like my guides and guardian angels are going, hey, Melissa, you're on a mission. Like, pay attention. You're in Egypt. You're in Greece. You're supposed to learn something.
You're not a
And
tourist.
I just go, well, how could that be? It's almost like my my light ship of time travel, my own little time travel ship, has a radio in it to remind me to pay attention. And that, to me, it's even though that sounds so ridiculous, it has helped me over and over and over really kind of catch on and learn what I'm supposed to, and like catch up with myself and learn how to expand when I go, now that's, time travel is such a concept that's hard for all of us to comprehend. And many of the things that all of us mystics, delve into, work on, learn in our lifetime, study, are really hard to comprehend. So to have those little pieces and the how it feels good to fly through the tunnels and the tubes and the things, I think those are kind of classic good. And all the people can, if they want to try this, if they want to step forward in this next phase of learning time travel, can go, hey, give me a sign too. Certainly doesn't have to be strange music, but like maybe you can ask, and we are all kind of learning this together. Like, give me a sign. How can I know when I'm doing it correctly?
I got to toss in there, Melissa, that when I joked and said he's listening to the show right now, I got a big psychic yes on that. And it's very possible because we have a lot of fan base in LA. So, either he or somebody he knows might be passing this on to him. He'll be interested to know he's the soundtrack to your time travel.
He's actually the many of the songs and the connected dots in my life, not just time travel, but in many ways are Ozzy helps me a lot. I don't know how. That is highly irrational, but I'm telling you.
It's not irrational. It's just, it's just you. You resonate with that music.
Every time I hear it in the background, ding.
Any other stories coming to mind about your travels, ladies?
I had two places that actually, I guess three places that I would consistently find myself in. And one was, and I know I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but when I was in 5th grade, it was a very amazing year. All kinds of things, awakening type things were going on that year. And we were in social studies class, it was in 5th grade, opened the social studies book, and it fell open to the Taj Mahal. And we were all, it was like a social, studies thing. We were all talking, and I blurted out, not thinking, oh, I know this place. I go here all the time. I fly up to it, and then I fly inside, and I was describing the ceilings inside and and everybody, of course, these are 5th graders. They're all going, sure. And I remember I had the greatest teacher when I was in 5th grade, and he just was looking at me like, oh, brother.
What do I do with this?
And I never, it's interesting because I never have the desire to go see it in person, in reality, to travel there, to go anywhere in that country, like nothing. I have no interest, but I know that I have gone there many times. And there's always a place this started at a little bit later age. I think I was just entering my teens when I would be on this beautiful alpine lake, and the color was just the most amazing color. The color of Lake Tahoe. So you can get a clear picture of it. And I would just be floating on my back in this lake. I could see clear through the sky. It's like there were clouds, and I could go through those clouds. I could look down. I could see the bottom of the lake, beautiful white sand. And I felt so at home there. And I thought to myself, okay, that's where my soul lives. That's where I really live. That's home. And there were beautiful, just incredible colors, the most amazing colors. And I think the one thing that, I sort of processed from that was that knowledge that I can go, I don't necessarily even have to leave this dimensional field. I can just go within myself and I'm transported to that place. And I wake up sometimes after I've been asleep and I know I've been there. And it's the most amazing feeling. Like, I went home for a while.
That's what the afterlife looked like when I saw it. The
Beautiful.
vivid colors, the beautiful turquoise water, and it felt so amazing to be there. It felt totally like home.
Yeah.
Beyond anything ever.
The most incredibly beautiful experience.
Oh, yeah.
Indescribable, really. No words can.
No, I try, but it's never enough to really adequately describe it. A place that, and it's interesting, Melissa, you bring up Egypt. I'm like, I don't know if this vision this place I've gone to so many times is in Egypt, but it involves a pyramid. And it started with, I was lying on my left side in bed, and it was a small bedroom. So my dresser was only like 2 feet to my left. There was the wall. But I opened my eyes before I had gone to sleep even, and I'm outside laying in the grass, and there's a breeze blowing across my face and the grass is tickling against my skin. And I'm looking up at this pyramid, really tall pyramid, and blue skies. And there's a oval plaque in the side of it that I'm looking at that had a lion's face carving on it, which is odd with a pyramid. And I was just laying there and I'm like, well, this is interesting, And I remember that's when I kind of stuck my hand just to see, and I felt that first sensation of like going through like a sort of a gel barrier, but I'm there. And I saw that and experienced that from the same angle, maybe 5 or 6 times. And I was there for at least an hour each time. Nothing ever happened. And I'm very sorry to say that in all of the places I've traveled to, I never see a human or a living being or even an animal. I just see these places. I would love to see some humans or other beings, but for me, that has not happened in my time travel.
Ivory, you just described going to a Lyran, Lyran planet system.
Oh, I did.
and they have the pyramids and things like that. And one of my favorite time travel stories was when we were doing a hypnotherapy session, and we asked for the ladies to go to a past or future space, and she was really progressive and spiritual, and she was very expanded minded. And the first thing she says when, I said, go through the portal. You just described a portal with the gel, and go through the portal and go into this future life or this past life, whatever will bring you the best information. And I said, so now look at the ground and look down at your feet. Tell me what you see. And that was the first thing to get her stabilized and balanced in this future life that we were going to. And she says, feet, don't you mean claws? And I said, oh, okay.
So they're lion people?
Sure. She was actually a bird person, and she was not necessarily interacting, very tall being that helped humanity. But she said, this is not exactly Earth. This is not exactly the same. She said, it's not as gross as it is or terrible as it is on our planet. It's the future, but it's in a different space, and I'm a guardian. Since she said, I stand on top of the pyramids and the pieces, and I just kept going, okay, well, and I kept having her explain more, trying not to, have her describe anything, like I was trying not to lead her or think I knew anything. And I just had her explain stuff, and she said, this is this certain space, and she said it's like Earth, but it's more evolved and uplifted, and we just help. And I said, are you like the police? Because she kept saying I'm a guardian. And she's like, kind of, but we don't need police. People aren't harming each other here. But just in case, one of the it's almost like carriages instead of cars rolled down the street and children were in danger. We just take care of stuff to make sure, you know, if there's an earthquake or something, we just make sure everyone's okay. And I just over and over asked her, like, so what does it mean that you're in the future? Because she said, I am in a different place, but it is future. And later, humanity, we are going to come into understanding that we are, our consciousness is going to, we can go there. We belong in the future. And there are different perspectives that none of us humans have quite caught on to yet. But she described some of the ways, like, yes. And I'm like, so are we all bird people later? Or, you know, like, what does this mean? And she said, well, we're divine beings. And so we can, you know, evolve, and in future, we can present ourselves in different ways, in different energies. And she said, she described that, and it made me catch on to when we talk about how we are awakening and ascending into, you know, 5D and higher, fifth dimension. Perhaps they don't have time and space the same way, and we are all, you know, like, it's our divine right as human beings to kind of catch on and grow into this and evolve a little bit more. So, but I just thought that was brilliant when you said with the lion, the Lyrans are lion, star beings, cosmic beings, galactic beings, and they're so bright. That is also where she was at in some of those spaces.
Interesting. Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I've always wondered about that. Very interesting.
Part of your future self, like one of your places that you belong, that you're just.
I'm down with that, because it sounds like a peaceful, intelligent, humanitarian place to live. I'm all for that. I don't want to forget to tell people, and we've all experienced this as well, I think, how mundane time travel can be too. That can not seem like true time travel. And I want to describe what I'm talking about. I keep thinking about an episode where I was sitting in a restaurant in Cottonwood in the afternoon in a booth by myself. And as I was seated, to the left of me was a long table with about 10 people, a loud family, just having a good time. There were children, older people, the parents, and it was a little loud and a little much for me, but I thought, well, they're such a nice family. A minute later, I looked over and the tables are empty and they're separated, and they're wheeling in a man in a wheelchair and his wife, and no one's at those tables, and there's no dishes on the table. And there's like no way they could have finished their meal, cleared out of there, cleared the tables, separated them out, cleaned the floor, everything they needed to do in a minute. So I was seeing a time when that family was there, and it was as real as can be. Didn't think a thing about it until I realized, oh, they're not there. And I know, Roz, you've had experiences like that, because we've talked about that. Like, I mean, you can be in broad daylight, fully awake. But it's not all about going to another planet or going to another time that you can really see anything different.
It's really for me, you know, it's really a little bit of a wake-up call in a way, because my mother always used to, when I was a kid, go, Roz, wake up, you're dizzy, Roz.
I love that.
I really would be in a totally different place.
I do that.
Yeah. I mean, I just would be totally disconnected.
And sometimes I consciously do that too, as an empath, when I'm in crowded, very loud, too much energy situations. I consciously leave in my mind.
Check out.
And I go elsewhere to survive it, because it's just, I'm in overload, empath overload.
Yeah.
And my brother, I can remember being at a funeral for a family member, and I had sang a song, and then I went and they had sat me in the middle of this pavilion of 200 people. And then everyone started to socialize. And my brother came over and he's like, are you okay? You look like you're like completely gone. That's because I was.
And you were.
Yes, on purpose. Loved all the people, but I just can handle that. So Terri-ann, when you find yourself just going, is it a conscious thing for you?
Sometimes it's conscious, like you guys, even it's hard to differentiate. Is it spirit? Is it another time another time and place that I'm in? I travel to Egypt a lot too. That's one of my favorite places to travel to, and I love to learn more and more about it. Avalon is a new place that's been coming up. Melissa and I actually started it with one of our spiritual hypnosises. And so Avalon was coming up. So I just bought a book because I don't know anything about Avalon.
That's so funny. Oh, I wanted to say this whole thing about whether time exists in these other dimensions. The reason that I put in the publicity time as a man-made construct is because that's a fact. Man decided they needed to organize the day into segments and the week into days and the month into weeks and so on. It's a man-made organization of time. But when I do readings, angels all started coming in when I'm doing timelines. And they told me a long time ago, like they can't work with, is something going to happen soon? They don't understand that concept. They can't give a specific time of something happening, or even necessarily a specific day, because it means nothing to them. So it's very interesting that we felt the need to do that, but now we take it for granted that that's the way time is. But no, we could be very wrong. I think time is not that linear. I think time is fluid. And we just haven't discovered yet a different way. All these mathematicians who figured out that they say they can transport somebody into the future, but they could never come back. That's because they're thinking from what they know right now. That's all they have. But when maybe some scientists all at the same time get a download of a whole different way to approach this, where they can just loop the time, and we can travel here and there and be like tourists if we want to. Our scientists can go and try to help us stop from doing something that's really detrimental. Maybe we never started polluting the earth. Maybe we went off on a Save the Earth program from the very beginning. Something like that. Who knows? But I think it is possible. We just don't know how to do it yet.
And that's a really good point.
And I'm fascinated by that. I love time travel movies. I always have. And I wasn't even thinking about the fact of being a mystic. I just thought they were fascinating. Anything else you ladies want to add today? All right. You've been watching the Sedona Soul Sisters show. We appreciate you joining us. Thank you for tuning in. And we really enjoy sharing our knowledge and experience with you. Next week, we're going to be doing the show on Tuesday, just one-time deal, because I can't be here Friday, and I'm the one who edits and mixes and uploads the show. So we'll be doing the show live next Tuesday at noon instead of Friday, and then we'll be right back to our Friday schedule. Next week, our topic is UFO sightings. I'm so excited for that. In the meantime, have a remarkable, enlightening week.